Actually live, everybody. Welcome to this very special conversation. We have Aseel El-Baba with us from Holistic Optimal Health. I always want to say Holistic Wealth Nutrition. I don't know where my brain is going. Do you know what's interesting though? Because I think for a lot of people, when we think of holistic, we think of health and we think of nutrition, but we don't always think of wealth, of money. So why don't we kick us off with that? Welcome. And tell us what made you start your company, what made you name your company Holistic?
Thank you. So actually, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Lindsay. And my background was in financial planning, and I used to be a financial planner in the Canadian banks. And I got to experience interesting scenarios in which the money played different roles in people's lives. And ultimately, I got to see people with lots of wealth, but not having the ability to enjoy it or to experience it.
Yeah.
And then the other spectrum where people just didn't think that wealth was accessible for them. And then the more I started engaging with different types of people throughout my financial planning career, I realized that wealth is an attitude, and it has to be holistic, because your net worth and cash flow is one element, but it's not the whole story. It's actually a much bigger picture than that. So that's why I branched out of the banking world.
Yep.
I became a financial therapist and started Holistic Optimal Wealth as of March this year.
See, okay, you just dropped so many pearls there. I want to pick up as many as I can. I loved what you just said about being a financial therapist. And again, that's not something that, at least for me, before we initially met, I'd never heard that before. And I think a lot of people do have that separation in finances being very linear, being more rigid, certainly goal-oriented, right? But not necessarily what's the holistic relationship in my life with money, and what are the other facets that money influences who I am as a person.
Of course. There's so many intertwined complexities to this topic. Money ultimately defines the relationship we have with ourselves, the relationship we have with the world, how we show up, and so many different complexities of like self-worth and identity. So it's a very, very charged topic, and yet there's not enough spaces for us to explore this topic. The majority of people grew up in households where this topic is a taboo, and therefore we don't even understand what our relationship with it is. A lot of what we do is built based on patterns that are unconsciously passed on to us. So we're just living in a lot of unconsciousness when it comes to money and the role of money in our lives for the majority of people. So my mission is to bring clarity to this conversation and purpose and mindfulness around it, so that it's something that you have a healthy relationship with, and it really plays a major role in bringing out more of you versus being a negative area or something you avoid or live in complete oblivion to.
Well, and it's neat. I love that approach. How my brain is kind of breaking that down is when you think about even things like going on a diet or a weight loss journey. It's not just about counting calories and working out and what we eat. It's like what is going on behind the scenes internally, that there are maybe some habits there that you don't want. If it's building a business, before we go into creating a product and marketing it, we got to take a step back. What is my mission? What is my purpose? Who do I want to serve? And this is the same kind of thing where it's like, before we just jump into budgeting and spreadsheets and, sort of that focus on the goal, let's take a look at what is playing underneath with my relationship with money and myself, and how might that be needing a tweak to free me up for even more powerful, journeys towards accumulating wealth or creating financial freedom or whatever that goal is.
Yeah, you hit the nail on its head, because when I used to create all these amazing financial plans, that takes me literally hours and hours. Like an average financial plan easily takes 15 to 20 hours to build. It was like heartbreaking to put all this effort behind it and not tangible results, or like people will just toss it and it would sit somewhere collecting dust. And it was just, why did I do this work for? And that's when I started realizing you can't necessarily fix an emotional problem with a logical plan. And
Yeah.
people's issues with money is most likely than not an emotional issue. So there's two ways to approach change. Uh, Sometimes we focus on outcomes. So I want to lose weight, I want to save, $100 a month, or these are like outcome-based approaches.
Yes.
The way I work with clients is much deeper than that. It's identity focused approaches where we dig much deeper beyond the layer of the outcome. So the behavior is the layer where most people are conscious of, and dig deeper to the thoughts, emotions, and belief systems that drive these behaviors to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Dig deeper and change the belief layer. That is like uprooting the issue from the inside.
Yes.
That's an identity-based approach where the changes are sustainable and they're long-term.
And I was just gonna say, and now we got a sustainable change, and it completely changes the trajectory of our potential. And I'm curious too, does that change people's goals? Like, do people change their goals after doing this work with you?
So I've definitely experienced that. Like, even if I talk about myself, so originally, if I have a mindset that this is all I'm capable of, my goals
Mm-hmm.
are gonna be symmetrical to my identity. Like, I'm only gonna be, and I used to actually, one of the things I grew up hearing all the time, Aseel, your goals are too big for you. And the people who would tell me these things
Mm-hmm.
they were coming from a good place, because
Yeah.
they didn't want me to lead a life of disappointment and struggle and an uphill battle. And I
Yeah.
realized there is some truth to that. My dreams were too big for me and are still too big for me. But instead of making my dreams smaller, I want to make myself bigger. I want
Yes.
to grow into my dreams. And the exciting part about pursuing a mindset or a wealthy lifestyle is who you become as a result of it.
Yes.
And that's essentially what I'm trying.
I'm like, you hear, I want to like get, I'm like, I want to get in here and talk about all this. No, but that is such a great point. And I, I think a lot of people hear that your dreams are too big for you, right? We have people in our lives who want to keep us safe and want to make sure we don't get hurt and keep it realistic. And I think that even just having the wherewithal to say, okay, if my dreams are too big for me right now, I'm not going to give up on my dreams. I'm going to become bigger.
Yeah.
And I think that is the very first step in any journey to personal growth and evolution, and striving for those bigger goals, whatever they are.
Yes. The complicated thing about this particular topic in the context of money is how the belief system that you have about money shapes ultimately what you pursue and how you behave around it. So if there's a fundamental layer within you that believes money is evil, or you have to be a selfish, greedy person to love money, then even though on one end you crave stability and freedom and whatever you perceive money to bring you, there's another opposition to that tells you, well, I'm a good person. How can I pursue something that brings me corruption and changes my core values? So essentially, that's where a lot of people struggle. There's a what I find in my clients is there's a clash of coexistent needs that almost contradict each other. And
Interesting.
but you're like one step forward, one step backwards, and that feel stuck in their lives, especially when it comes to this topic.
And I mean, we came today prepared, or you came today prepared to be able to break down one of those common money myths. And this is something that, especially as entrepreneurs and new entrepreneurs, face all the time, which is that I have to work hard to make money. Money is a struggle, right? And so I would love for you to share your thoughts on that money myth, that money misbelief. And I know that you brought some tools for people to be able to get out of that thinking. So I'm going to give you the floor. Let's hear it.
Sure. So money as a struggle is a very universal belief. And what I encourage clients to do first and foremost is to explore how this belief was started. So often people who believe that money is a struggle grew up in an environment where it was the case, and therefore we inherited that belief system to be a fact. It's the perception in which how we see the world. Now to counter, so essentially, one of the first tools I would introduce in this equation is the tool to bring further awareness, because you can't fix a problem that you don't understand. So the first tool is to bring awareness, and that's by journaling. As simple as that sounds, there's two ways to journal on this topic. One is called money memoir, in which you actually explore early money memories. Early money memories would be like when you first started making money, or the first time your relationship with money was introduced between you and your parents, or maybe when you went to school and started for the first time becoming aware that there's people less fortunate than you are, or people more fortunate than you are, and all these different things. And then the way we make sense of the world is when an experience happens to us at a very fragile age, we create a story around it. So a money memoir is the first tool I introduced to my clients to help them to start digging deep into these hidden areas in our life that we, tucked away for such a long time. To start bringing awareness to where this belief started and how was it reinforced by the further evidence that we collected throughout our lives. So that's the first tool I would offer. It's the money memoir tool.
Love it. You said there was two ways to journal, right?
Yeah. The second one is actually gratitude. That's more present based, and that's reflecting on the relationship you have with money presently. So I actually journal on a daily basis the interactions I've had with money during that day, whether it's if it was bills I had to pay, or like now that I'm an entrepreneur, so it's my money is very sporadic throughout the months. There's no specific paycheck like it used to be. So every time I get money, and I just reflect on all these things, that how I felt, how did this come about in my life, and bring more awareness to it, but more so in the present moment. And another way you can do this as well is future based, where you start thinking about what the future of your financial health is going to look like, and literally get clear on that. And that's very interesting, because a lot of people know more about what they don't want than they know they want. And that's why I love journaling, because it gives us clarity so that we can be the architects of our own lives. And that's very, very important, because when you feel that you have agency in your own life, then you're control and you're capable of changing the things that are not working, versus feeling that there's bigger systems out there and you're just hopeless in the existence of all the other things. So the second tool is called Arigato. Gratitude tool. Arigato is a Japanese word that stands for gratitude. And when I first heard about this concept by Ken Honda, who is known to be like a Zen millionaire, I wasn't sure how powerful it was until I started really, really practicing it. And that is really helpful, because you express gratitude immensely for not just the money coming in, but also as money goes out. And that's because there's people who experience anxiety in spending money. That helps you in creating that flow of money in a healthy way in and out of your life. But also in expressing gratitude to the money coming in, you're opening up more possibility for more to come in. And we have like infinite abundance around us, and there's different ways to make money in our lives. But naturally, we're programmed to think, maybe I need a 9-to-5 job, or I need stability, and that's how it's going to happen. And these are simple belief systems that we inherited from our parents. But if there's anything our society proved to us recently, especially with COVID, is the importance of diversifying your income. It's so crucial, more than ever before, to diversify your income. And now it's the time to educate yourself on what your options are and continue to open up your possibilities. And a simple strategy at the beginning is to express gratitude to what's already happening in your life, the sources of income you already have access to. And this way you're opening yourself up to even more. And that is something that continues to improve.
I love it. And so how do you find that? What do you think is the biggest transition that your clients experience when they start doing the Arigato?
Depends on the client. So if clients were a lot of my clients experienced anxiety and fear around spending money. we live in a very high consumer society. So the myth is most people spend a lot of money, but there's actually a different set of people who don't spend money, and it's also a dysfunctional behavior because they're living in fear and deprivation and scarcity, and that's just not healthy either. Just because you're able to put money away doesn't mean that's a healthy way of dealing with money. And that's why it's not necessarily the act, it's the underlying emotions behind the act that helps me understand if a client requires help in a certain area. So ultimately this tool is powerful because it frees up this fear of holding on to your money when you're expressing gratitude. So I actually experienced this recently because I went to the dentist not too long ago, 2 weeks ago, and I just became an entrepreneur on March. So I've never not belonged to a health benefit plan as part of my work, and it was my first time like just trying to navigate the space on my own. And when I walked into there, I literally started thinking about the business, the overhead costs, especially now what they're going through COVID, the dentist, his secretary, his dental hygienist, and thinking about all their families and how my money contributes to them. And it just was a very different energy by the time I went to the counter to pay my bill, thinking about it from that perspective.
Yeah, that is a very different perspective than I have no coverage, I'm out of pocket. What is this taking away from my own family or my business? And instead looking at it as, how is this money helping support all these other families, these other businesses? Totally different energy. I love that.
Yeah, and then the more you practice it, it becomes very autopilot. So you just have this natural sense of gratitude, and it intensifies with every money interaction in your life out. So it creates that really beautiful flow, and it does take mindfulness and practice. The third piece is for money management, and it's called value-based accounting. I love this tool. It's one of my favorites, and I see radical transformation with my clients when I see them implement this tool. So right now, when people try to budget or go over their cash flow, it's very distant for most people, and it's unrelatable in the sense that these terminologies bring up a lot of anxiety for us. So for example, when we're looking at our statements, we have like income, assets, liabilities, mortgage, a credit card debt, student loan, groceries. I mean, these words are just not personal. So value-based accounting is really when you start infusing your values with how you spend your money, and literally transforming your cash flow and budgets into personal and meaningful ways to you. So that you shift the way you see your money as well. So for example, instead of paying your mortgage could be called home sweet home, or my safe space. There's a very different energy that goes around that, and it actually makes me more excited to do my budgeting, because that's a very personal and meaningful thing to me. So if a client has credit card debt and they're just really having a hard time paying it, but then realizing that this debt was part of paying for, let's say, traveling or education, and transforming this credit card debt to represent the value it was used for, is just a different energy in paying it all together. It really makes a big difference once you start implementing it. And the way I look at it is, even on a macro level, then you can start seeing, well, what are the values I care about the most? For example, health, relationships, growth, whatever these values are for you. And your expenses should reflect that. So I tell my clients, don't tell me what you value, show me how you spend your money, and I'll tell you what you value. And a lot of times there's a big disconnect, because usually we don't think about these things in this perspective. But when we start aligning our expenses to our values, and monitoring it in that way, we are going to be more inclined to be engaged in the process and bring mindfulness. And integrity and intention. I say intentionality and integrity, and I always confuse these two words. So it just creates a transformation.
Aseel, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your wisdom and your tools. I know I can't wait to implement them. I'm going to definitely be sending these out to our community. Goodbye, everybody. I will see you all soon.